Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday and happy first day of March. For people who don't know me yet, and while people are starting to come on, my name is Michelle Crosmer, and I am a registered dietitian and a renal dietitian specialist. And I am going to be joined by Michelle, and she's with Heart Health Nutritionist. And joining me in just a few minutes here, and we are going to be talking all about heart health and kidney health. So thank you everyone who's coming on. Hey Michelle.
Hey Michelle, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. I'm excited that we're able to do this today.
I know. I was just saying, we've been Instagram friends and colleagues on here for at least a year, probably maybe 2 years now, but we're finally doing a live together and able to talk with our community. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, me too.
Do you want to introduce yourself first? Just kind of what you specialize in as a dietitian and what you do?
Sure. I'm Michelle Rothenstein. I'm a registered dietitian who specializes in preventative cardiology. Preventative cardiology, both in the sense of managing someone who already has heart disease and preventing heart disease. So this is anyone who's at high risk for heart disease or who has a heart condition like atrial fibrillation or heart failure or cardiomyopathy, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, that category. And I'm super excited to talk to you today because I don't feel like enough people know about the connection between kidney and heart health. And this is I don't think a lot of people even know this about me, but I got into heart disease prevention because I was working in a dialysis clinic. And so I just love telling this story, and I find it so suiting right here because I don't think people realize this. So the number one killer in people who have kidney disease is heart disease. Kidney disease usually doesn't kill somebody. It can reduce quality of life, but the heart attack and the heart disease is what causes that. And when I was this was a long, long time ago, but when I was in a dialysis clinic, when I first got there, the dietitians were recommending this diet that I was like, what? Like, this is so unhealthy. Why are we giving people like white bread and no fruits and vegetables, refined sugars? Like, how is that something that people are recommending worldwide, nephrologists and dietitians? And so when I was looking into it a little bit more, I was like, and I just started off, I was like, there has to be something that's a little off. So I did more of the research and looking at how heart disease is the number one killer. We really need to merge the kidney and the heart healthy diet together. And that's where over 15 years ago, where I discovered that my love for heart disease prevention really came from heart disease awareness, because people just don't realize the connection. And so it's so important that we don't isolate one organ, right? We need to be taking care of the whole entire body. And when we are thinking about the heart and kidney connection, I mean, just take a step back and realize how your body is giving blood and oxygen to all of your organs, right? If we don't protect your heart, we can't protect your kidneys. And when you think of heart attacks and strokes, you think just of the heart. But that plaque that happens in your blood vessels can impede blood flow going to your kidneys, going to your liver, going to your brain. It can cause heart disease, can cause kidney disease. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. And so I think it's super important to merge these two together. So I'm really excited about our discussion and just creating awareness for everybody about how we can be proactive in any stage that we're in and ensuring that we're protecting both of these vital organs.
Yeah, I love that. And just like you said, I mean, we often in the kidney disease world, we often like the biggest fear is the outcome of like progressing to dialysis or progressing to end-stage renal disease. And like you said, cardiovascular disease or cardiovascular events like heart attack and stroke are actually the number one killer of people with kidney disease. So if we can be proactive and preventive and target both kidney health, heart health, and even other things like diabetes, right? I mean, diabetic kidney disease has even higher risk of cardiovascular disease and cardiovascular outcomes. So, and like you said, kidney disease can cause heart disease, and heart disease can cause kidney disease. And it's just important too for all, especially in the kidney community, is when we think of kidney disease, where there's this systemic, chronic, pro-inflammatory like state that our body is in, and that affects our blood vessels, and it affects our blood vessels in our heart and our heart muscle. It can increase risk of calcification and atherosclerosis, but all of those same things, like you said, we have all these tiny blood vessels in our kidneys and our eyes, and then bigger blood vessels in our heart, and so we can't just target one thing and then forget about the other. And I think it's that connection, like you said, is a lot of times people get confused, especially with food and nutrition recommendations, because they'll look online, okay, this is a heart healthy diet, but then they find other things for kidney disease or diabetes, and they're like, well, how the heck do I make this all connected?
Yeah.
And I got started in dialysis too, so I think we all kind of, if we worked in dialysis, we realized that there's just this lack of education and prevention and awareness of doing things earlier on to prevent a disease in the first place, or prevent or delay progression, which we can definitely do with food and lifestyle. So
100%.
Okay, so I guess my first question for you then, what would you say in someone who has kidney disease, or someone who's just simply at risk, maybe they have high blood pressure or they have diabetes, but what heart-related labs would you recommend that they have checked? Because I've worked with people before who've come to me and like they've never even had a lipid panel done, or it hasn't been done in 3 years, and they have kidney disease, and I'm like, well, how is this not being checked? So what are your recommendations around that?
So just Steve, I totally agree. And even on the opposite spectrum too. So I have people who are like, what's EGFR? What's creatinine? What are all these things? Like, what does that mean? And like, everyone's kind of just pigeonholing like, oh, I have a family history of this, or I have a family history of that. They just look at one parameter. And the real answer is you should really know all of the parameters that your doctor is testing, but sometimes we need to ask for a little bit more. So right off the bat, blood pressure is number one. One thing in terms of blood pressure, I find a lot of the times you go to the doctor and you're anxious, and the doctor's like, oh, it's a little elevated, don't worry. I can't tell you how many times I've had clients who've told me that it's, oh, don't worry, for 20 years. And now they have a high calcium score, which means that they have a lot of plaque in their arteries because they never took care of a little high blood pressure. Or people who had been diagnosed with white coat syndrome and never ever talked about, never went home and retested that number. And then that high blood pressure also lead to a chronic event too in cardiovascular disease. But when I was treating in the hospital, I remember people coming in with a crazy high blood pressure number, and they going on emergent dialysis and having to start dialysis because blood pressure is silent. You don't know that it's high or low. So they came in for an emergency, a hypertensive emergency, and that led them straight to dialysis. So blood pressure is really important because you can also check it at your home, and you can know what it is and how it fluctuates. So that's a parameter that we should all know. We should strive for less than 120 over 80 and not say, oh, it's borderline high, it's not a big deal. It is a big deal. We need to make sure that we optimize that value, especially with science-based nutrition. Because you're not going to get medicated with high blood pressure in the 120s. It's only going to be when it's higher or if you have another risk. And at that point, it can be doing damage in your arteries. So I always say know your numbers, especially your blood pressure number, because there's so many things nutritionally we can do to optimize that value and normalize it within a couple of weeks. So that's number one. The second things that I would want to see is your lipid panel. I'd like to see an advanced lipid panel, but most time that's not really taken. So I just look at whatever's there, and if the person is at a higher risk or they're willing to go to either a specialist or their doctor can draw a couple of more, that would be helpful. If you have a family history or you don't know if you have a family history of heart disease, I do also recommend the lipoprotein A test. It's an inherited genetic risk factor for heart disease. It basically tells us if you have a higher chance of the plaque to grow more earlier and more aggressively in your arteries, leading to a premature heart attack. So that's also a good marker to know. And I like to also look at inflammation. So I like to look at high sensitivity CRP levels. I like to look at GGT levels. I also like to look at white blood cell count. I like to look at everything basically that's in a metabolic profile, but really educate my clients on what these all mean. A lot of times, like, you wait for the doctor to call you and say everything's fine. But if nothing's out of range, or if it's borderline, they might not tell you, or if they don't have a medical intervention for you, they may not even tell you, which is unfair. But you can ask and say, hey, can I have a copy of my blood work? And every year I want you to, trend your labs, because the range is so wide. And so if one year you go up by 20 points in your LDL, that's a sign. I see a lot of people post heart attack. And once I look at their labs and I see their trends for 5 years, the year that they've had their heart attack, their LDL went up by 20 points, but it's still within normal. They were on a statin and they still had the heart attack, but there were trends that were going and showing in that there was more plaque progressing. So it's really important that we look at trends and that we understand those values. And if you don't understand them, ask your physician, ask your healthcare professional who can spend the time to explain it to you.
Yeah. And I think that's so important, like you said, because get a copy of your lab. And I love when people come to me and they already have their Excel sheet or their Word document and you can see everything for the past so many years. But that's really like, don't ever take everything looks good or no news is good news. Get that copy and compare over time, because there's a wide range, even for kidney disease, kidney health. And you were talking about the GFR, correlate that with the kidney function that's remaining, and it doesn't usually flag you unless it's less than 60 for the GFR, and that's already moderate kidney disease in stage 3.
So that drives me crazy. Can you talk about that? Why is the eGFR on a lot of the physician reports, it's just like above 60 is normal, and I'm like, but that's not normal, especially like if we're in 60 to 80 and you're young, that's not right. If you're okay, if you are above 75, 80, and it's above 60, great. But if you are 50 in your 50s or mid 60s and your GFR is less than 60, that is a flag that we are having some pressure. I mean, I look at eGFR at all of my clients' reports, especially because we want to make sure that blood pressure is not affecting that number, because that oftentimes is one of the accelerators. Blood pressure and blood sugar and cholesterol are the 3 things that will progress kidney disease much quicker than anything else. And so we have to look at it, but a lot of times it doesn't give us an actual number. It drives me bananas.
Well, frustrating thing, and depending on the lab that you go to, it will either give you like your creatinine, but it might not give you the GFR, or it might just say GFR over 60, or it might just say like normal. And so ultimately, I mean, again, if you are given your lab work and there's no GFR on there, you can always go online and find a GFR calculator, or creatinine, and your and different things just about you, your age, and you can plug that in and you get an estimated GFR. So I would say if you don't see anything on your labs, then do that. And then the other thing, and you could do that even if it just says over 60. Well, you want to know, is it 62 or is it 95? We want to know what.
So I think just to make sure that, just so everyone understands, so eGFR stands for estimated glomerular filtration rate. It tells us how well your kidneys are filtering out the waste and blood in your body. So we want to know if it's doing it efficiently or if it's kind of slow and sluggish, which more waste products are stuck in your bloodstream because your kidneys are filtering out those waste products. So what I use, and I don't know if you use a different one, but I use MedCalc, medcalc.com. I like that eGFR because there's a couple of different, like there's Cockcroft, there's a bunch of different equations that they use. I don't know which one, as a kidney specialist, which one would you say is most accurate?
I mean, it's nice when they have the ones where they'll take like body surface or your body mass into account, but ultimately just make sure you're comparing like apples to apples and oranges to oranges. So if you use one calculator and then the next time you get your labs and you use a different one, just use this. I mean, ideally use that same GFR calculator. But you had mentioned earlier, like we were like, why does it say normal if it's over 60? So the other thing that's really important too is it's also the urinalysis and checking for protein in the urine, because if you are stage If your GFR is over 60, you might be in stage 1 or 2 of kidney disease, which is mild kidney disease. And if you have no protein leaking in the urine, then you have a pretty good prognosis there. But if you have stage 1 or 2 kidney disease, and so your GFR is, let's say, 75, and you have high amounts of protein leaking into the urine, that's a lot worse. And that's something that really has to be targeted, because that progression of kidney disease is a lot faster when, and other complications and more inflammation, all of that comes into play when you have that high levels of protein leaking in the urine. So I think that's important too. A lot of times people don't get the urinalysis done, or maybe they don't understand it, and that's something, I mean, really, especially someone with just diabetes, but even high blood pressure, both your blood work and the urinalysis should be done to be checking and monitoring your kidney function at least once a year, if not more often, depending on where you fall in your health and your other risk factors.
I love it. I think the urinalysis is something that we don't talk enough about in terms of how important it is. Also, I like to look at the pH of your urine to see how acidic or alkaline it is, and seeing how that plays a big role in kidney health too. Two things I want to touch base on about that though. So let's say someone gets a urinalysis and they see ketones in their urine, because the keto diet is still going strong. So what do you say about that in terms of kidney health?
I mean, I think with everything, so sugar, ketones, protein in the urine, white blood cell. I mean, all these things that can come up on your urinalysis. And like you said, the pH, it's looking at, I mean, your trends, and also what you're eating in your diet and medications that you're taking, and then understanding what it means. And also not just looking at one snapshot at one time, whether it's labs or the blood work. It's not just one snapshot at one time. And you can have something because you had, I don't know, like a UTI, or something could be off based on that. And so typically if anything's out of range or off, I would say don't go, okay, don't take it's fine, or we'll check it again in another year. I mean, ask for that to be checked sooner. That way you can compare those trends with that.
100%. I always say, you can't understand your metabolic story and your journey and your baseline without understanding that trend of lab work. One-time snapshot is not telling us much about your long-term picture of things. And when we're talking about prevention of chronic disease, from kidney disease, heart disease, all disease, we're really looking at a long-term plan. And if we're looking at just one time and, I'm going to do something for a month or 2 months and see how it goes, we really need to look at it more of a long-term lifestyle in order to actually get to those, to prevention. Because everything is progressive. Everything is an accumulation of many years. It's not just I ate this one thing yesterday. It's really we need to look at the whole long-term journey, and not feel like we have to be perfect to get perfect labs. It's not really about that. It's more about consistency and those long-term habits. And so the metabolic story also helps us with that picture, instead of just looking at it at that one-time snapshot.
And that just reminded me when you said that. So is there anything from, I think a lot of times, and I hear this often, people will be like, well, like they don't want to go do their labs because they're like, I ate this one meal, like I had a burger, or I ate this one meal out, or I was been doing really good for a couple months and I had this 1 week where I was off. So especially from a heart standpoint and lipid panels, but how quickly can what you're eating and your lifestyle factors impact your blood work?
I mean, if you have a week off, that's not really going to increase your cholesterol and your LDL and your panel off that much. If you are salt sensitive, a meal can increase blood pressure temporarily. We can see effects with that. But we're really looking at an average of what's in your blood. And I want you to get a lipid panel fasting. That's important. But other than that, what you ate for a short period of time, it's not really effective. It's looking at a longer period of time. So don't feel like that. Don't dismiss it. Really take a proactive approach of, okay, well, what am I going to do to make sure that this number is proactively lower? Because I've seen people say to me, I'm frustrated because I got my cholesterol panel and the doctor told me to lose weight and I lost weight and my cholesterol went up. Or, I took out red meat, I took out dairy and my cholesterol went up. And a lot of times what we realize is that you're not adding in those therapeutic foods that you need to help lower cholesterol. You can be underweight, normal weight, and overweight and have a heart attack. You can have all of those and have good labs and bad labs. Your weight is one risk factor in the realm of cardiovascular metabolic risk, and where it's located is much more important than the actual number on the scale. I would rather you be a number on the scale that you can maintain for a long period of time than be yo-yoing between 28 pounds up and down. That's when we see heart rate variability and heart rate increase and blood pressure increase and blood sugar increase, and our metabolism slows down. So we need to look at the whole picture and realize that that's one risk factor. I have a lot of people who come to me who had a heart attack and they're fit. They're CrossFit runners. They look great. They have a six-pack, and it happened to them because nutrition is so important in the game, and that's not something that people are really honing in. And everyone who comes to me like, oh, I don't know how this happened, I eat healthy. And when you really look into it, healthy is so skewed in terms of so many different, like there's so much out there of eat this, eat that it becomes so confusing and so overwhelming. So my biggest thing, whether it's heart disease, kidney disease, whatever you're focusing on, you need that support and community of qualified professionals to help guide you and make sure you're doing it the appropriate way so that you're optimizing your lab values for the long term, and not feeling guilty by, oh, I went on vacation and I ate this, or I did that, I went out for dinner and I shouldn't have eaten this. Like, there's no guilt. It's really more about, this is my lifestyle, and most of the time I'm eating this way and I feel good about it. It's easy, it's long-term implementable. We need to think of the whole picture and make sure that it's a lifestyle change that works for you. And that's, and that's science-based. And I think that's also really why me and Michelle connected. When we've done our work, when we became Instagram buddies, we kind of were really all about, we tell the science, and like, we're very that type of, research-driven professionals who that's the soundness behind our work. And so I think that just brings us back to our connection too, which is why I'm so happy that we're doing this live and bringing around more awareness.
Yeah. And like you said, we have approaches and how we, we help people and we work with them, but ultimately it's, the goal is that each person that we work with and each person that ideally we connect with on our social media and stuff realize that this is not a short-term diet fix. Like, hey, you do this for 30 days and then your labs are better and then that's it, it's over. It's really, we'd rather go slower and have it be more practical and sustainable for you than complete 180. And everyone's different. Some people want to do that, like to do that. Some people need more time, but I think that's a really important takeaway, is this has to be a lifestyle change, because these are chronic progressive diseases, and we can't just do something a couple of months and then take off a few months and then go back and have that yo-yo of weight or even labs going up and down so much, because it just takes a toll on the body, on the heart, on the kidneys, and on our pancreas and everything else. So can you talk more about, because I think we're both like strong advocates for what in, like, yes, a lot of times diets and things focus on like, hey, don't eat this, don't eat that, or we have to remove this, but it's more important or just as important what you replace. So what are some of those things, like, and I know you focus a lot on those like things at the micronutrient level, but what are some great, like, just heart healthy, kidney healthy types of foods or groups of foods that people should be focusing on adding to their diet?